And we're live. What's up, guys? Four Corners back with another Jamal Hate Cast. I am your host, Ray. You can find me on. I'm just kidding. I don't hate Jamal. At least I'm not number one anymore. I've fallen so far down the ladder of Jamal critics. It's not even fun to hate Jamal anymore. And I'm happy to cede the title to the rest of the community. Y'all got it. I'll be over here.
You were
Um,
hating Jamal before it was cool. You were like an
I,
underground Jamal hater.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I'm a Jamal hate hipster. Um, but yeah, that is Peter Bucketson's 88. How are your Buffs doing? Had a good win this weekend. On
Hey,
some
big
positives.
win! Oh, so things are super exciting in Buffs Nation. Got a big game this week against Kansas. Excited.
Nice, nice, nice. Also joined by CT Fazio 24. What's going on, bud?
What's up, everybody? Ray and Peter, thanks for having me on. Always good to hop on the pod. I'm sure we'll have a lot to discuss tonight as far as the last two games are concerned. But no, doing well. Just got into the swing of things coaching, so just had our first game yesterday. So yeah, it's going pretty well. But we're fully into basketball season now, which is great.
Great. Happy to hear. Happy to hear. I'm enjoying. I've had a few games for my CU Denver Lynx as well. Representing the old men out here. We are 2-1 on our season, so that's going. We are one of the best among the local commuter schools. So that's
All
fun to
right.
say. Yeah, there's a lot I think to say today about Jokic, about Jamal, about the Nuggets in general. A lot of people having a lot of feelings these days, and I just want to start us off on a positive note and really focus on appreciating what we no longer have today, which is Nikola Jokic playing basketball. I believe he is being there for the birth of his child. I can't confirm or deny, but that is the word on the street. And I'm super happy for him. I'm happy to give him as much time he needs for that. But, while he's out, let's just take a moment to appreciate how good this man is. I am all the things are coming together, I guess, from a narrative perspective in my mind that Jokic probably is winning a fourth MVP race. Um, Peter, how do you feel? Are you high on that? Are you low on that? Do you think it's going to happen? Is the voter fatigue strong enough to overcome the fact that he's been as good as he is?
I think that you can make a really good case that he's the early favorite. Um, it's going to take some help from the rest of his teammates. I don't think Jokic can go like 42-40 and win the MVP. I think they've got to win like at least 48, hopefully 50 games. But there hasn't really been another candidate who has been like right there neck and neck with him. I guess Anthony Davis has had a really good start to the season, but I feel like most people have sort of moved on from him as thinking about him as an MVP candidate. Most people kind of think it should be like Tatum or Luka next. So Luka's had a pretty weird start to the season. Tatum's been really good. So it's too early to say for sure, but I definitely think if he keeps up the level of play he's been at, it would be really hard to deny him.
Yeah. How about UCT? Do you feel like is there anyone else even you can project as being in that conversation right now? I know it's 11 to 13 games in for most teams, but if it's not going to be Jokic, who can it be?
Yeah, I mean, I think Jokic is probably pretty far ahead in the pack right now compared to everybody else. I mean, you would think maybe somebody on the Cavs, but they're kind of doing it by committee right now in their undefeated start. Mitchell and Garland and Jared Allen, all those guys. But, I mean, probably I would say Tatum or maybe Shea would be in the mix just because he's kind of carrying right now without Chet. I think those two probably are the likely guys that are going to be in the mix to close out the MVP discussion. But I think, once Jokic comes back and the way he's playing out right now, I mean, he seems to have reached a new plateau in his game, which is pretty unfathomable to say, considering all of the success that he's had and the level that he's played at throughout his career, and he's kind of on that upward trajectory still. So, um, hopefully, I know usually when the Jokic gets an MVP, they usually don't win the championship, which is something that hopefully, if he wins this year, hopefully they can reverse that kind of trend. But yeah, like Peter said, I think this is Jokic's MVP to lose, and it's pretty crazy to say, like 11 games into the year. But the way he's playing out right now, I just don't see, health provided, knock on wood. I just think he's probably going to be the favorite to win it again.
I mean, I'm right there with you. I think there's a lot of I don't think any of us imagined Jokic would be who he is coming into his career. Obviously, he's a little bit unheralded and drafted it during a Taco Bell commercial and all these sorts of things. But if I'm being real, if I'm going to give you an honest answer, I think he'll be top 5 all time. I'm not saying he retires today and that's what he gets, but I think based on what he's doing and how long I think he'll be able to do it and how committed I think he is to, some people said he doesn't love basketball. I think he loves basketball. I think he'll be around for a while and his game will age in a way that supports that kind of a career.
Well, and it's more fun if you're dominating, right? Like, have we ever seen guys leave at the top of their game in this sport?
Jordan,
even
for a couple of
LeBron's
years.
Yeah, even LeBron has fallen. I wouldn't say fallen off, but he's fallen down the pecking order of top players in the league, and he's still playing at age 40. So, it's also LeBron's kind of like a outlier in that sense as well. But
yeah, I don't see Jokic retiring before his contract's up, and he's got what, 3-4 years left on it. So
I think 4 years.
I think he's still going to be at prime level those 4 years.
And I think he's one of those guys who is so flexible, so skilled, and so with it mentally that I think he's not playing at this level at 39, but he is one of those guys I think could also be like a Chris Paul. He's still going to be in the league, still could be doing whatever he wants to do on the court. Maybe he can't do it 81 games a year, but I think he'll be there. While we're on the positives, CT, I'll throw this to you. Before we get to other stuff, what are some other things that have impressed you about the Denver Nuggets so far this season?
Peyton Watson is definitely up there for me. He had a rough start to the year for sure, but he was coming off a hamstring injury, so those are kind of tricky and it take a while to get adjusted. But I think Watson's been really good. I think he's shooting like 37% from 3 around there, which obviously not that big of a sample so far, but still encouraging after last year where he shot sub 30%. His creation game has impressed me a little bit more this year. He's kind of put a little bit more into his bag. His defense has been pretty good for the most part. You've been able to put him on a variety of different guys. Luka one night, Kyrie the next night, Shea one night. He's been one of the stoppers as far as playing in AG's absence. He's definitely been someone who's been a bright spot. Honestly, until last game, I thought Mike has been really good too. I think Mike has been pretty good after a shaky first 2 games. He was pretty pivotal in carrying the Nuggets in AG and Jamal's absence. He's been kind of like the second guy in command. I think for me, he's been the second best Nugget this year. AG, I would say, is probably in that mix as well. Christian maybe is in that mix too. But I think when you look at Mike and you look at the production and the offense that has been needed next to Jokic, he's kind of delivered in that sense. But yeah, and then Christian too, of course. Christian's been great. Probably in like a mini slide the last 2 games as far as his 3-pointers concerned, but to start the year, he was magnificent. I think the defense is a bit hit or miss, but I think when you look at the offense, that's kind of been the trade-off there. As far as a little bit more increased offensive usage, better shooting for sure, and I think that's kind of trickled into the defense a little bit. But I'm sure he'll turn that around. I think, especially when AG gets back and Jokic is back as well. So I think those 3 guys for sure: Watson, Mike. It's kind of more or less what I expected, but I will say he's been pretty consistent, which has been he was pretty pivotal to that 7-3 start, and then Christian as well. So I think those 3 guys for me have been probably the standouts so far of the year, and of course Jokic. But we know what he brings to the table.
Yeah, Peter, how about you? What is your, I mean, obviously the sort of the Booth boys have come through in a way that I think we were hoping for, but um, whether it's about the Nuggets or even just like a general NBA season thought, how have you been? What are some positive aspects, I guess, about the Nuggets that you've been feeling this year?
Well, before he went down, AG was shooting the cover off the ball to start the year.
Like
So
56%. Yeah.
so that's like really encouraging. I guess we'll find out when he comes back. Is it real or is it just like a hot streak? Typically when guys are below average shooters their whole career, they don't really turn a corner in their late 20s, but it is possible. I believe Jason Kidd used to be like really bad 3-point shooter, and then he got better at it later in his career. So, I don't expect him to shoot 50%, but if he's just like, I want to say he was at 29% last year. So if he can just be like a 36% 3-point shooter this year, that's a major boost for the offense. And they need him to take them, right? Because they don't have the Nuggets are not a high volume 3-point shooting team. This has been, a topic of discussion for pretty much the whole offseason. And man, it was such a shame to drop that Minnesota game where he just was unconscious, because I don't know how many more performances we'll get like that from him. But if he's at least confident in shooting the 3 ball, that's really good. Other than that, CT pretty much hit on all the positive.
How do you
I
feel
will
about
say
Russ?
that, huh?
How do you feel about Russ? 5 by 5, 5 5 ish. Mentions that I think and something I kind of agree with. Russ to me has been um, more positive than negative. Obviously, he sometimes comes out with like a negative plus minus, maybe some lower percentage nights than you wish you would. But as far as Nuggets backup point guards have gone, I think he's been as good as can be expected.
Yeah, I think what's been really fascinating about watching Russ is he's been more or less what I've expected, which
Mhm.
is he comes in, he plays really hard, he plays fast, he rebounds, he's been defending, not great at shooting, gets hot every now and then. I think what's frustrating is he still has like 1 to 3 plays a game where it's just like a bad IQ play. And I know he's kind of always had that, but it just kind of reminds you that even as guys get older in their career and they realize they have to like scale their game down or change their role, it's super hard to just turn the switch, right? You can't just go from a guy who's like high usage and it's all about me to, oh, now I'm like a pure role player, team player. Like you're still going to have a little bit of, what got you there in you. And I think Russ's mindset is he's always been super aggressive. So I don't have a problem with him being aggressive because somebody's got to shoot, right? Somebody's got to score. I mean, that's kind of like the discussion that we always used to have about Will Barton, right? It's like people would get mad when he like would get in a slump, and it's like, well, who else do you want to shoot? Like this team doesn't really have scores, so that's kind of how I feel about the bench. Is like you kind of need Russ to put some pressure on the rim, and he's getting to the free throw line just like I predicted. Nuggets are doing that's one category they've really improved in this year. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I want to say they're like top third in the league in free throw attempts after usually being like near the bottom. So he's really helped there. But Ray, one like thing that I've really enjoyed about him, I don't know if this would be like a nuanced thing or not. It's probably just like an obvious thing. He looks for Jokic like so much that it's kind of jarring to see a player of his caliber, like, and stature in the league defer to somebody the way he does to Jokic, right? Because he didn't defer like that to Durant. Now, obviously, that was a different version of Westbrook, but I just think it's really good to see, like, hey, no matter what you think of Westbrook in his career, he's not a dumb basketball player, right? Like he makes plays here and there that might make you think like that wasn't smart, but he's still trying to win the game and trying to do the smartest thing to win the game. So I think we've been frustrated with other players in the past or maybe still on the roster, who look off Jokic sometimes. That's not really something we've had an issue with Russ yet. So that's been good to see.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it even surprises Jokic sometimes in the way that he can find him in creative ways that he's not used to. That, oh, the ball pops up in my hand through like a tight window. Partly because Russ is a good passer, but also because Russ has that athleticism and has that creation ability to draw defenders into him in a way that very few point guards have had. I do wish, you know, 2 or 3 of those pull-up jumpers that he takes, I wish those could be shots for Michael Porter, maybe shots for Julian Strawther, maybe. But for the most part, yeah, he's brought a lot of energy, and that energy is also translated to some of the other bench guys, and I think that's been a real positive for the team.
And he's been a big positive off the court too, right? Like the teammates have already talked about his leadership and how he's helped them.
For sure, for sure. I think he's been a generally positive influence in the way that you need to have a certain level of respect in the league to have that weight. But it also it's nice when it's coming from more than just your star players. And I
Right.
think that Peyton's taken that to heart. I think Christian's taken that to heart. He's so supportive. He's so energetic. I think he has the guys behind him feeling confident when he's attacking those lanes and hitting those kickouts and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Now, to try to shift a little bit more into the negative end of things, I think the non-Jokic minutes have were maybe, I guess, 7-5. So that's 12 games into the season, and we've always known that this was an issue. Every year we watch Jokic step off the floor and the team collapses a little bit or a lot of bit, and we hate it. But then he comes back in and everything sort of levels out, and we breathe a sigh of relief. Right now, with him not just not playing, I think it is a little bit more acute because A, it's not necessarily because he's injured, but also watching what's behind him operate without Jokic has been really jarring. So before I go in, I don't want to take all the pie here. Um, CT, give me some of your thoughts about. I mean, maybe we can kind of keep Jamal in his own bucket, but
Right.
about the bench in general. I mean, obviously, there's been a lot of positives, but I think not 2 through 4. I think especially looking at the backup center position or maybe just the front court in general. What are your thoughts as far as um, what is the issue here, and what are some ways you think Denver can make adjustments that can lead to better outcomes in the future?
Yeah, I think with the bench, I think what we saw during that winning streak was actually that, Jamal was out, AG was out, and Russ was able to fill in at point guard next to Jokic. And Russ next to Jokic is actually a positive combination in the net. Russ and Dario and whoever else it was, Russ and Zeke, Russ and whoever else is just not a positive lineup. And of course, if you play with Jokic, you're going to be a positive player, unless you're Facundo Campazzo. But basically, for the most part, you're always going to be a positive with Jokic. So I think that's really what contributed to it for the most part. But I think now at the bench, and Murray just came back. AG is probably going to come back, I would assume, within the next week or two. I mean, I don't know anything, but I would just assume, just based on he was at practice the other day. He's another guy to add to the mix. This has just always been like a problem throughout the Jokic era. I don't know if there's a solve for it. I don't know if there's any other scheme that Malone and the staff could put in that would help. I just don't think Russ and Saric is a good combination. Russ works pretty well with a lob big, and Saric is not that. I actually think Murray and Dario actually looks pretty decent for the most part, but I just think it's more so the combinations that are problematic for the Nuggets for the most part. when you look at the bench combos. It's either you have, you know, defenders out there, or you have guys who just can't really defend, like Dario can't defend. Strawther has been, in my opinion, pretty bad defensively this year so far. So it's just like the combinations of like, and Murray, we'll get to him. His defense has also been pretty bad too. So it's just like a combination of like guys who just are all in the same boat, or it's like not really a good mix and match of what we're seeing out there. So yeah, I see Ish said, Vlaco came back. I personally think I know Ray and I are the Vlaco stands on Twitter, but I do think Vlaco actually has to play moving forward because he's at least a guy who knows his role, and he's actually an NBA caliber bench piece compared to what else is on the bench. I think moving forward, once AG comes back, I would hope that the bench. I actually would hope that AG is a stagger guy, and I don't want him playing backup center this early. I think that's problematic just because it's going to take a tear on his body. But I do think if you can play a lineup of Russ, Julian, P. Watt, Vlaco, AG, I think there's some switchability there that you could do. And it's not like AG is just going to be guarding the fives. I would actually make Vlaco guard some of the fives because he's, pretty strong. He can hold his own in the paint, I think. I think the rebounding might be an issue. But again, I think that the bench just needs an identity. And we saw last year was a lot of switchability. Same with the year before that as well. I think they should probably lean back into that. Go 5-out switchable. And I think Vlaco's a guy who he's a good facilitator on offense. You could give him the ball and you can cut off him. He could find you. He could stretch the floor. He's pretty good in the pick and roll too as a roller, and the short roll too. So I think there's a lot of ways in which Malone could be creative with the full output that's out there. And he's done that this year. I think Malone, I think he's done a great job coaching this year as far as his lineups have gone. He's been pivoting away from a lot of stuff that hasn't worked, like Saric, early in the season. So I think moving forward, I think the Nuggets just need a healthy team. They need AG and Jokic back. When they're so top heavy, that's just the reality of it. And I think once AG returns, I think more stuff will fall into place.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Before I give my own kind of analysis, Peter, do you have anything you wanted to add into that sort of conversation? Anything that you see that Denver might be able to do that can, I don't know, just lead to a little bit better? It doesn't always have to be good because I think the bar is so low, but maybe some less bad outcomes.
I think CT hit on pretty much most of it. I'm glad you let him go first because I know Vlaco's his guy. And I just want to say that when he came in the second half against New Orleans, one, I was obviously happy for him because he didn't play at all last year. But two, it was like, if you're a close watcher of basketball, it was obvious instantaneously that he was like a competent NBA player to me. We've got to see Vlaco play before, obviously in the past, but I've been asking for years. I just want a competent bench big. It doesn't have to be anybody crazy, really good, but just give me somebody who knows what they're doing. And say what you want about Vlaco, but the guy knows how to play basketball. He knows what he's doing. And I really hope that he earns Malone's trust to get minutes going forward. Because when you have a Jokic team, and I've said this in general, teams that win the championship, they have smart players. They don't have dumb players. And I do think Vlaco, once he gets his legs under him, will be good enough to be a rotation piece on a championship level team. I don't know if this roster can get there. But if we remember 2 years ago, he beat out Jeff Green at one point in the season, right? He was getting Jeff's minutes. He got hurt, and then he was supposedly healthy by the time the playoffs started. But I get what Malone did. He's like, I'm going to roll with a vet. He's healthy. Why switch it up now? And it ended up working out. I don't think it was a slight to Vlaco. I think it was like, it's winning time. I think he respects both guys. But now I really hope that he saw how he played and that, he gets a real opportunity to get like back up 4 or 5 minutes going forward. Now, obviously, CT, Vlaco with Dario together is not a great combination, mostly just because of like foot speed and rebounding. But I don't know. I don't know how you see Vlaco play in the second half and keep that guy off the floor when Zeke comes in and it's like the team immediately goes on a 14-0 run.
Yeah. Yeah, I think with Vlaco, it's like Peter said, he knows how to play. And the Nuggets just need more guys who know what they're doing out there. And just not go like minus 14 in a matter of like a couple minutes.
Right.
And Malone, I think, rewarded Vlaco for that. He played in the last game in Memphis. He played in the New Orleans game when he wasn't there. And he actually was, I think he was a +1 in that game. So he was a positive in the windup of everything. But yeah, I think actually Vlaco and Sarge might not be that terrible of a combination defensively. I think it might be a bit of an issue. But if you're playing with Russ and P. Watt, I think it might be serviceable. But yeah, I think Malone's just going to have to go. He's going to have to get creative here and I think another issue too that we see with the bench is just there's so many unplayable guys at this point toward the back of the roster. Like Hunter Tyson had a couple games, but I mean he's just not looked good over the past however other minutes he's had. He's shooting like 12% from three on the year. Zeke Ray, I know he's your guy, but he just has not looked anything like a rotation piece, unfortunately. And you look at the rest of the guys, Pickett, I think DeAndre's washed. Like the list goes up. Holmes is unfortunately out for the year. Like there's the problem is like the back end of the roster. There's no, and this was why I wanted to sign, right. I wanted them to sign like a Lonnie or like a DSJ. And it's not like that those guys are quote unquote good players. They're at least better options than what is there right now. So it'll give you a chance at least to put up a fight, and play in a game like this where the Nuggets don't have many bench guys. Jokic is out, AG is out. You need somebody at least to maybe, create a spark out there. And unfortunately, the Nuggets just have a bunch of guys. And this was my criticism at the end. Sorry for the rant, but there was just my criticism at the end of the Connolly era. He just had so many guys at the end of the bench that weren't contributors. And you looked at the Warriors series, the Nuggets just had like AG, Monte, and Jokic as guys who were like serviceable guys, And I think now we're seeing the same thing where it's like, of course, that we'll get to Murray and the rest of that and later, but we're just seeing that the surrounding pieces, it's problematic as far as like who could they trust in the playoffs and who actually could play right now in a rotation where the Nuggets just missing so many guys and like they lost by 20 points to the Grizzlies. They lost to the Pelicans without a bunch of their top guys. So I think that's really what it comes down to is like the back end of the roster is very problematic. And that's why we see the bench has been not good at all. So, that's the question right now. But I mean, I think Malone will figure it out. I think there's combinations that are serviceable. I think Charlotte is going to be a guy that could play eventually in the playoffs. I think Watson's there right now. I think Watson's been pretty good. And then Russ, we'll see. I mean, I don't know if he could play. I would go on the side of being doubtful, but he's going to have to. And then Vlaco, again, I think Vlaco could be a guy that you can put into certain lineups and configurations where he could be a positive guy. I think Malone has some options, but the options are pretty limited.
CT, I don't know if we can learn anything from the game because it was against the Hospital Pelicans, but I did like that stretch where they went to a zone. I felt like they got some stops. They just couldn't get a freaking rebound, right? So if they could like clean that part up a little bit, I kind of like that zone gimmick for that unit because there's just not a lot of guys with foot speed there to stop traditional pick and rolls and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I've liked their zone for some of the games this year. Last year, I didn't like it at all. I just thought they gave up too many openings in the middle of the zone. But I do think, like you said, if they go a little bit more of a switch-heavy lineup, I do like that zone kind of look that they can play. And I like, especially like Russ at the top of that zone. He's been able to create some havoc, force some turnovers, even Peyton as well. Against the Thunder, that was a really good game where the zone actually worked and was effective. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's something definitely to explore moving forward.
And Ray, just one last thing real quick on Vlaco. Out of all the guys on the bench, I guess Sarge too, but he's the only one where you're really like, he's going to come in and just play his role and just play basketball the right way. He's not trying to like explore his game or like find some footing in the league, like he's been here for so long now that he knows what he needs to do and what the team needs him to do for the team to be successful.
Yeah, I think he's a smart player. I mean, he knows what he's doing. He knows what shots to take, what shots not to take. He processes that pretty quickly, and I think he's one of the guys who are closest to, you know, a lot of there are a lot of players on the roster who I think aren't guys you can play every single night in every situation, which is I think what Malone wants. I think that's what he's comfortable with. You know, the times when we see I like DeAndre Jordan, for example. I don't think he can play every week. I don't think he can play every game. He's 36, I think, and as someone who is recently 30, um, I can't play every day, you know, and I think the recovery time is a big factor there. That DJ will have a game where he hasn't played in a few months, and you're like, oh, actually, you know, he does some good things, set some good screens, gets some rebounds, get some lobs. You know, maybe he's not jumping 40 inches in the air anymore, but he's serviceable. And then he plays 2 nights later, and he just looks. I
Dead
can't
tired.
explain how deeply washed he looks. He looks like Clorox bleach. Like it's really bad. That's not to say that he's a bad player, but I agree with you, CT, in the sense that I think it's going to take some creativity and thoughtfulness about the combinations you play, about maybe selecting the right player for the right matchups, and just factoring in all those things on a day-to-day basis. Is it more complicated? For sure. Is it less consistency for those players? Yeah, I get that too. But at the end of the day, not everybody is a good matchup for everybody else, you know. Even and I'll tell you, like Zeke doesn't seem like an every night player to me. I think he provides some things Denver can use. Like I think some of the best moments for the bench this year have involved Zeke, not necessarily because there are so many things he's not good at, and even I, as one of his stands, can list them. Like his hands aren't great. He doesn't have a post game really. He's not a threat on the roll. He doesn't jump out of the gym necessarily or finish through tons and tons of traffic, although he's gotten better at that. His shot looks better than it has before, but he's still not taking that many of them when he does play. And I think a big part of that is that he's playing center, and he's not a center, guys. Like I don't know, I'm sure y'all also agree with this, but he's just not a center. Like the moments where he has looked good are next to other bigs, and so much of what they're doing so far is single big looks or sometimes no big looks. Where you know we've seen Peyton Watson play center this year, we've seen Michael Porter play center this year, and those are interesting things. Like I think in playoff situations, Peyton Watson at center is an interesting idea,
I agree.
but Peyton's not a screen setter. He's not going to box out 250, 60, 70-pound guys. Like that's not going to be a consistent thing that's sustainable. And I think Fives makes a great point that the rebounding for me, that's the biggest issue with the front court. I think that when we think about Jokic, you know, we open the show with how good he is. You know, he's like this is a new maybe analogy for the show, not a football analogy, not a food analogy, but you guys ever had one of those like Leatherman multi tools?
Yeah.
Like the really nice ones, the $100 ones. They've got multiple files and a couple saws and some screwdrivers on there, some Phillips and flatheads, and they've got a few different blades on them. They got all these sorts of different things. That's who Jokic is to me. And I understand that that's difficult to replicate. I don't think it's even reasonable to expect that one person can do all of those things. I mean, some of the rebounding totals that Jokic brings down in a night, you know, he's looking at 15, 20 rebounds a game. And as much as I'm impressed with that, I don't think you can ask any one person to go out and get you 15 to 20 rebounds. And certainly that guy is not going to be able to do all the other things Jokic can do. So all that is to say, what I'd really like to see is just more looks with multiple bigs. You know, Vlatko and Zeke together have had good moments because where Vlatko lacks that foot speed and the defensive versatility, Zeke has a lot of that.
Yep.
And, you know, Vlatko can do a lot of the on ball, not on ball creation, but you can involve Vlatko in the pick and rolls. You can involve Vlatko in DHOs. You can play through him in the short roll in a way that you can't with Zeke, but that's good for I think that can be good for both of them, I guess is what I'm saying. In a way that, can you do that every night? No. But between Vlaco, Zeke, and Sharich, who I think has looked pretty good with Jamal and not good with Russ for very specific reasons, like when they run a DHO and the defense goes under that screen, Jamal can hit that shot. Russ, you don't even want shooting that shot, really. Um, and I think it's thinking about those combinations and getting a little bit more out of the roster. I don't want to see Sharich, Hunter Tyson, and Vlaco on the floor together. That's not a good, I'm not saying Hunter can't play ever. Maybe you need another shoot. Yeah, he's not shooting well yet, but I'm willing to buy, you should keep shooting. That's what I would say is whether you're on an NBA team or you're playing pickup basketball, you should never just stop shooting. You become a liability. Maybe you hide your own percentages, but you become a liability to other people. But yeah, I would like to see more size on the court at one time, and maybe a fewer Jamal and Strother. They're kind of redundant, I think, offensively. And defensively, and maybe we can kind of use this as like a parlay into that conversation. Neither of those guys are stopping a lot of people. Strother has impressed me with his verticality. He's really good at that. He's one of the best rim protecting guards I've ever seen, but he can't keep guys in front of him, and he's not great in the team scheme yet. He's still so young and still so inexperienced. So maybe instead of those multi-guard looks, and instead of giving up an 18 rebound disadvantage to the ailing Pelicans, maybe they can use more of those bigs in tandems with each other in ways that cover up for each other's weaknesses. And I think that would go a long way to making the bench sustainable, without guaranteeing any individual person an every night role. And I know Malone loves to give guys every night roles, but I just don't think you can do that with this team. That's how
Yeah,
I feel.
I 100% agree with the bigger lineups thing. I'm going to go back to something that a team used to do a few years ago. Back when Mike Budenholzer was coaching the Bucks, his philosophy was basically like shut off the paint at all costs, right? Lopez was always dropping. He was a great rim protector. I understand that we don't really have a Brook Lopez level player. The Bucks gave up a ton of 3-point attempts, but what Budenholzer realized was, if I can take one part of a team's offense away, I'm going to win more games than I lose. And yeah, you'd have the random game where teams would just bomb threes on the Bucks, but they mostly had a good defense, because if you weren't hitting your threes, you were going to have a really bad night offensively against them. And I think the thing that's frustrating about the bench, Ray, is the Nuggets coaches have decided that they want to go smaller to match up speed-wise with all these teams, which is like, it's like they're trying to have their cake and eat it too, right? It's like, okay, we want to match up better, but then we just got to fight hard and get the rebound. Now, part of that's true, but I'm kind of on the Budenholzer like idea here of maybe we should just play a little bigger. If it means you're going to give up some more open shots, so be it. There's going to be games where those go in and you lose anyway, but the games where they don't go in, you got to get the rebound. The Pelicans did not play well the other night, but when you out rebound a team by 18, it's like you're going to have so many more possessions that's why they beat us. And it was just so frustrating to watch that over and over again. And so that's like my reasoning for it is the rebounding, like 555 was saying. Unfortunately, I don't think Malone is wired that way. I don't think he's wired to be like, yeah, I'll concede an open shot.
No, and he likes guards. Like,
Yeah.
Multiple guard lineup. Yeah.
But yeah, as we kind of move away from this conversation, I think there's like a looming thing in the distance. I don't really think it's impending, But I think depending on how the next couple of months goes, people will be thinking about it. Fives mentions that Jay Huff, a guy who Denver's just played, looked pretty good. And I think there's a lot of consternation about the fact that Denver has had so many options at backup center in so many different sizes and shapes and styles and temperaments. Um, I guess, CT, I'll ask you this. How do you feel about the possibility, and I know, again, this is preliminary, it's only 12 games in, that Denver might want to look outside the locker room for an answer in the backup center role or the backup front court positions?
Yeah, I think it's possible. It's just the Nuggets have kind of been spurned so many times by giving up assets for bigs. Look at JaVale McGee, Thomas Bryant, the same thing, right? And it's just I don't think it's worth it, even though the options are not good behind Jokic. I think the Nuggets are just going to go to AG at backup five again in the playoffs, which I think is the right move. I do think AG at backup five gives you a lot of versatility, gives you a lot of mismatches, allows you to play five out as far as switching is concerned. So I personally wouldn't give up anything for it. Um, Again, it stinks that like the Dario situation has already kind of not played out well. And again, there's still a lot of season left, so I'm not just going to rule him out and just say that he's done. But I do think that the lack of optionality right now is definitely an issue. But I just don't think getting a backup center and giving up assets for it when the Nuggets are kind of lacking in that department as far as like what they can give up. Like I wouldn't give up a first round pick to get a backup big. Um, I just think they're gonna have to kind of roll with the punches now, and Malone's gonna have to get creative about what he's gonna play. I like Ray said, I personally would like to see Vlatko and Zeke play in the front court. I think it's worth a look for sure. I think playing next to Jamal at certain points, playing Jamal and Christian right with the bench, or playing Mike next to those guys. Like I think there are certain combinations where Vlatko and Zeke could work. I'm willing to see it because I think Malone has experimented a lot this year, but I would like to see him go even more into the bag, right, and play Vlatko and Zeke, play other combinations with the bench, just to see if you find something. And that combination historically in the past wasn't necessarily a positive, but it was better than anything that they had back in 23.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think Vlatko would actually help Zeke as far as his struggles are concerned and what he lacks. And like you said, I think Zeke helps Flacco's deficiencies as well. It's more so I do think that, if we're looking at Zeke's season right now, it's warranted that he's benched just on the production that he's put up. But I'm not ruling it out that like we should go back to Vlatko and Zeke and see if it works, because the Nuggets they can't play these guys 40 minutes a night, the starters. It's completely unsustainable. And it goes back to last year where the Nuggets got burnt out in the playoffs. So you're gonna have to either eat some of the losses and play some of these guys, or you risk the problem of burning these guys out again.
Yeah, I mean, fall five, pull out all your stops. I think
Right.
I have a food analogy. I guess is that I had um, when I was a kid, we would go out and we might go to the movies or something, or we go do something or the other. And on our way home, my siblings and I were like, "Mom, Dad, can we get McDonald's? Can we go to Pizza Hut? Can we go do X? Can we go get Y?" And one thing they always told me was that, like, "Hey, we have food at home." And we would always groan and roll our eyes and say, "Ah, come on." But I think this is one of those situations where you do have food at home. Like maybe it's not exactly what you want to eat. Maybe it's not the most
Hamburger helper.
enticing as it's sitting in that fridge. But if you get the seasonings right, you cook it the right way, it can be pretty good if you put in the work, and it can save you a lot of money. And nothing, especially it's come full circle for me as an adult. Have you ever gone out and gone to the grocery store, spent, especially in this economy, $100, $150 on groceries, and now your fridge is full, and the next day you're like, oh, and then you go out and eat, and you feel like an idiot because you're kind of burning yourself on both ends. Is like, hey, fast food ain't the healthiest thing. This new hypothetical new center may not be the best guy. Um, and the food you have at home is kind of rotting on the shelf. And every day you don't play it. Every day, Charge doesn't see the floor. Zeke doesn't see the floor. Vlaco doesn't see the floor. You're cementing their unplayability in a lot of ways, where I think there is some not Jamal and Charge look pretty good. I do agree with CT in that sense. Russ, Zeke, and you putting out a unit with like defense and athleticism and energy and mobility, that made some sense. They had some good moments. I think if you put on your chef's hat, if Michael Malone puts on his chef's hat, so to speak, and really gets into his bag here, breaks out all more than 11 herbs and spices, he's going to need 20, 30 herbs and spices. But I think there is some light at the end of this tunnel in that sense. We're 45 minutes in, so I want to highlight a tweet. If you ever catch us before I'm going to do it. It's not my favorite tweet, and I don't. We may or may not agree, but I do want to appreciate people who engage with the show, and so I'm going to read it off real quick. I can't zoom in on it too hard, but yeah. So what we got is and this is kind of about the Jamal situation, is that this is Fat Boy on Top at Cooked by Tubbs. Jamal has come into the season out of shape 2 years. Sorry, let me put on my acting chops here. Let me deliver these lines real quick. Jamal Murray has come into the season out of shape 2 years in a row. He has refused to take 2 half-court heaves this year, went on a trip to New York City when he already had 4 flights in 2 days prior and 17 hours before a game. Do you agree that he simply doesn't care? Peter, does Jamal like basketball?
Yes, Jamal likes basketball.
He does like MMA. We know that.
He loves MMA.
It was a good fight Saturday, though.
I have to go through the timeline here real quick, okay? So Jamal Murray was good last year. He was. And then he got hurt, right? He went out, and when he came back, he looked a little hobbled. And then by the time we got to the playoffs, he still wasn't quite right. And he played just well enough to get through the Lakers series. And then, of course, he had, 2 or 3 good games in the whole Minnesota series? Now, some of that is matchup, but I think we all agree that if we just get like a regular Jamal Murray in that series, we probably win it. So it was disappointing. Yeah. And then, of course, strange summer, Canada's in the Olympics. He's never played. He wants to go represent his country. I don't think any of us faulted him for it at the time. But in hindsight, looking back at how bad he was there, I don't think he should have played. I think he should have said, sorry, Canada, I really want to go, but my body just isn't right, because didn't Josh Kroenke basically come out and say he was like dealing with something? So it's kind of on Jamal, and then he comes into camp, and I forget if it was Malone or Jamal himself or somebody was like, he's fully healthy now, no problems. So if that's true and he doesn't have any ailments, his play has been very concerning. So I'm not going to go as far as to say I don't think he doesn't care, but at the same time, I would be lying if I thought that Jamal has been giving his best effort so far. He can play better, but he can also play harder.
That's fair. How about the travel thing? I mean, CT, do you feel like would you say it's like irresponsible of him to have gone in between these games? So like, fly out to New York, fly back, go to an MMA fight. kind of, I mean, it is, it's your off day. So there is that balance there, but also he's not playing well. So that, I mean,
Right.
where do you land in that sort of, what is the dynamic there in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I mean, I don't think it's my place. Just speaking for me personally, I don't think it's my place to criticize him for that. It is like you said, it's kind of his day off. I will say I don't think it's the best look that he did it. Considering they had a game the next day, and even like besides his play of late, I just don't think it was the best look. He's entitled to do what he wants on an off day. He's a growing player. But yeah, I don't think it was the best look as far as what we saw. Um, but yeah, I mean, considering his play, I don't think that's really a factor into it. But I mean, yeah, not the best look, but who am I to tell someone on their off day what to do?
Yeah, I'm not that mad specifically, but there's two parts of it for me. There's one part where it's I don't care what you do as long as you're fulfilling your obligations as a basketball player. Like if he was putting up numbers, sure, go to Vegas. That's the James Harden thing, right? James Harden
Right.
loves strip clubs, but as long as he's putting up numbers, I don't think anyone's ever cared. It's when he has these like playoff folds or whatever he does that once you stop winning, like Fives is saying, winning cures everything. If they had gone 1-1 in this stretch, I think people would feel a lot less. It would be, like you say, not as bad of a look. I think the other aspect of it is like from a leadership perspective, it's not a great look either because
Right.
it's kind of a model of behavior that, like, okay, you're for better or worse. Like, obviously, this is Jokic's team and Malone is the coach, but you know, I think all of us have been in locker rooms at varying levels before, or even everybody listening has had a job and been in a workplace and been part of a team. And there's a hierarchy of who is most important. And that comes with benefits, that comes with some privileges, but it also comes with responsibilities. And I think that when you are evaluating it from a leadership perspective, though the combination of him going out after a bad game and then the next day having a bad game when we really needed him, I think it's just a bad look. Like I don't think I'm not going to tell you what to do. You do what you want to do. You love fighting. All right, go train in Australia in the off season. I'll see you in see you in August. It's cool, but um, it really just I don't know. It doesn't feel great to have that happen. But hopefully he plays well tomorrow. I think Jokic will also be out tomorrow, and I think this is kind of his chance to, you know, we've been talking a lot of shit, and I say we as in just Nuggets fans in general, the community at large. This is a great opportunity to shut us up. Show us that you can be this guy who is worth all the money and gets all the accolades. I mean, he's not getting the accolades because, well, you got to produce for that, but is getting the shine, the appreciation, the love, the fact that he has a contingent of people who through all of this, the last year of his game, will defend him, go to the mat for him. That, I mean, even if I'm not his biggest defender, I feel the pain of his biggest defenders when he has games like that, because it's almost like you're putting your heart on the line for a guy. You're putting your faith in a guy. I put my faith in a lot of guys, When Zeke has a bad game, I'm like, it hurts.
Yeah.
It's hard to hold on to that stock, but I really hope that he can pick this back up and shine a little bit more. And if you're listening to this, tweet at us more. I will dramatically deliver anything you tweet at the Four Corner Twitter account. I'm making that promise. I would do that.
So
I always appreciate any engagement and happy to do it. So
wait, Ray,
yeah.
I want to piggyback. I'm actually glad you brought up Harden because I was going to say that as well. Harden went to Vegas after the Sixers won a playoff series before the playoffs were over, like before the next series. So I guess there was like a decent amount of time off there, but to me that's still different. To me that is like you are not locked in. Jamal clearly isn't locked in right now, but because it's the regular season, I can kind of excuse it. You're 100% right about the leadership portion of it, though. But I do feel like we're getting a little bit close to a dangerous narrative here, which is that it's getting to a point where I feel like diehard Nuggets fans think that Jamal has character issues, and I'm not there. I think the worst thing that Jamal has done since he's been in the NBA was throw the Heat pack on the court last year, which was a bad look. Not the you're making a face. Look, Instagram was an accident. Okay, we don't need to rehash that. But
I'm not going to say
look,
anything.
I'm just saying, like, I don't think Jamal is like a bad guy who doesn't care and all this stuff. I think he's playing bad. I think he might tell you that. Maybe not. He's having some weird media comments lately, but as we know, he's always been pretty icy with the media. So I don't really hold much of the media stuff against him. I just want him to play better. I mentioned to somebody on Twitter the other day, he's getting harder and harder to defend.
Yeah,
But
I mean, definitely.
when he said that he thought that they just missed shots that they normally make against the Pelicans, part of that's true. But part of that is like, dude, when are you going to make some?
Well, he got outplayed by Brandon Boston in that game, which is pretty damning.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, we're talking about leadership. We're talking about taking responsibility. Jamal is second in command. He's
Right.
if Jokic is Batman, Jamal is Robin. Not to say that, hey, Robin is tough. Robin has his own show. Robin started the Teen Titans. You know what I'm saying? Robin has his own. He became Nightwing and got his own. I don't want to get in the whole comic book thing, but there's a lot of, or even like in any kind of setting, your boss leaves for the day. There's an assistant manager who's there, who's responsible for things and things like that. So I think part of that is like, hey, it's not that I understand disliking media. Media members they can be thoughtless, they can be rude, they can be uh, I
Competitive.
mean, yeah, yeah, they can form narratives out of things that they have no familiarity with. Yeah, I mean that. Okay, so which Robin? Fives is talking. Which Robin is he? That's a great question. Maybe we can have that. We can hash that out in another episode, or maybe I can do some writing about that. I don't know. We'll see. But I do think that communication is kind of a form of leadership in the NBA. How you handle the media and what you're willing to say and what you're not willing to say, what you're willing to take responsibility for. I guess you don't have to be nice, but I think one of the things that rubs people the wrong way is also that like you rarely see Jamal take responsibility for these kinds of like weaknesses, these limitations, these bad games. I'm not mad that you missed shots, but I am mad that you got out rebounded by 18. Like that's not a good look.
Right.
You could miss 1,000 shots. I don't really care, but you could box out. You know
Yeah.
that's on the team. But Jamal being a leader on the team, that I wish he would, you know, take some responsibility in that way. But I guess I don't know if I have anything more to say on it, and maybe that's where I land is like I don't have that much to say at this point. Like I don't want to be on here and I'm not really serious about having a hate cast. Like I don't hate him personally. Like that's not. I want him to do well, and I think all of this here and everybody in the community wants him to do well because we need him, um,
Right. Right.
and because like he's our guy. Why would we hate it? Why would we want? We're not preying on his downfall.
Yeah, I think that
Go
kind
ahead,
of
Peter.
goes. Oh, sorry, Peter. I think that kind of goes into. I kind of have some thoughts on this as well, and I think Jamal's standing, I would say, current standing feeds into the rest of the team. There's been a lot of discourse, especially after the last two games, about these guys are Jokic merchants. This is a one-win team without him, which that's not true. But again, this team would be a lottery team for sure without Jokic. They would be tanking for flag if there was no Jokic. That's true, and that's just because of how the management has built this team around Jokic, knowing well that he needs play finishers around him in a Mike, in an AG, in a Christian, in a Jamal. And again, Jamal has probably shown the most as far as being a guy who could be versatile enough. I think AG the same thing. I think Mike too, to an extent. But I think Jamal has shown, especially in the finals, that he's a guy who's been at the top and has gone toe to toe with a lot of with LeBron in a playoff series, with a Jimmy Butler, right, against a bunch of different guys. I think this kind of feeds into the conversation of, like, I don't know how controversial the take this is. I feel as though Malone, and I'm a Malone guy. I want him to be the coach. If stuff goes south this year, I want him to still be the coach, regardless. I do feel as though Malone holds Jamal to a different standard than some of the other guys. And we kind of see it with Mike, right? We're still subbing out Mike on defensive possessions at the end of the game for Russell Westbrook. And it's like, why are we still doing that when Mike has, by all accounts, been a better player than Jamal Murray this year? That's not a controversial take. I don't think that's just the truth. Like,
Who's in
and you
trade
see
conversations?
right,
every
right.
other month, it's like, oh, trade Mike for this guy, trade Mike for that guy, and it's like none of that is like, is Mike playing bad? No, he's having one of his best
Mhm.
seasons ever, and like,
Right.
uh,
And I think,
sorry.
I think Ish hit the nail on the head there. Why is Mike still the only starter that gets benched for playing bad? I do think that's a valid point, and probably some of the frustrations Mike has had over the years. And again, I completely acknowledge that the Nuggets need Jamal Murray to be their number two guy if they're going to win the finals this year. Mike cannot be the number two guy if they're going to win the finals. I completely acknowledge that. My issue is that some of the standards that we're holding certain people to, right? If Murray's defense has been woeful this year. Again, Mike's defense hasn't been great, but he's been better than Jamal on both ends. He's been a more consistent player than him. He's been a better player for sure. No, Grace, I agree, especially on the offensive end. I'm talking defensively. If we need to stop, they're still taking Mike out and putting Russ in for some reason and leaving Jamal out there. I think that happened during the Mavericks game. But I do think that with Jamal, it's like a lot of it is a bit more of the treatment is a bit different compared to like how I wouldn't say coaching him, but as far as like the on court kind of standing is what we see out there.
Mhm.
Um,
Everybody has a
I
different
wouldn't
job,
say right, and I wouldn't say that's like a problem that I have. I just think that it's something like if they're going to be fair about it, I think let's just see that and yeah, we could point to Murray's play being not good, and people probably are going to start throwing him into trade conversations sooner than later as well.
You
Um,
can't though.
but
That's kind of
you
my thing.
can't
It's like,
really,
what can you really say? Because like you can't trade him now. That is a conversation you could have had 6 months ago before he
right,
signed that contract. You could have had a
right.
conversation about like, oh, can you trade Jamal? But at this
Mhm,
point, like, I don't have anything to say about it. I just wish take the shit personally. Like,
mhm.
that's
Yeah, and
all.
if he's,
Guys,
you just have to hope that his injuries are not um, long, like standing now. Like I think his injuries, like, is it affecting his play? I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I
It's
don't
hard to
know
say.
if his injuries are affecting his play as of right now. Like, have the injuries actually affected him as far as his play moving forward? If it has, I mean that's a huge issue then. Like I'm not sure if that's the case.
And he's always been a guy who, like, what have we always said about Jamal? Oh, he plays better injured. Oh, he rolled an ankle. Oh, he's gonna tough it. He's always been a guy who, like, the injuries has never mattered before. Oh, he's got
Mhm,
bumps, bruises, scrapes, all these sorts of things. So it's like, I don't, where's the gap here? Like, what's the deal? What are you sad?
so
I don't know.
guys, as
What's
long
up?
as we talked about Jamal, I actually have a schematic question. So, CT, we knew that things were going to look a little bit differently this year with KCP is gone. And obviously the spacing has been a little bit different. Um, Christian Brown has played well, but I think it's clear that he's
Really well.
still not super comfortable taking threes. Like if he's wide open, he'll take it. But he's not jacking it up the way KCP was, right? I think it's fair to admit that. I think the spacing's hurt Jamal a little bit. But then
Definitely
this is more of a theory I'm working on than it is like I'm saying this is a fact. Is it possible, guys, that Jokic has been so good now for so long that other teams are just like, well, this guy's too good. We can't really stop him. Let's just single cover him and try to take Murray out. Because whoever that, I think you guys probably saw that report of the rival anonymous GM of the West said, like, the Nuggets go as Murray goes. I think that's 100% true, guys. When Jamal Murray is on, it's hard to beat the Nuggets. When he's just okay, it goes either way, right? So it's like, I think obviously teams are going to put their best perimeter defender on Jamal, but what has Jamal been really good at in his career anyway, right? He's been really good at late clock, tough shots. That's not really sustainable, in my opinion. I think he's still done a good job of running the offense this year. Now, obviously, he's not the hub, but he hasn't had like some major dip in the assists department. He just hasn't been shooting the ball well. Now, a lot of people have said that he doesn't have the same burst and he's not really getting to his spots as much. I would agree with that, but maybe he just needs to look for more stuff earlier in the clock. And of course, he's always started off struggling. So, it's a long season. Maybe he's like still getting his legs under him, which doesn't really make sense because he had a whole off season, but I don't know. I'm just grasping at straws here, guys.
No, I'll carry a little bail. So do you know what he's averaging in points per game this month?
It's like 16 something.
16 point, I believe it's 16.1. And his career average for the month of November is 16.2. So it's kind of like
right on pace.
It's normal for him. It's still disappointing. And but it's not to say that he can't improve. And
a marathon, not a sprint, right?
It is a marathon, not a sprint. 16 points per game for a guy you're about to be paying $50 million a year to doesn't feel good. Ooh. But I do think there's a couple more. Like, I have some ideas for what Denver can do to get more out of him, but CT, I'll throw this to you first. Do you think there's anything like schematically Denver can do different that can get more out of Jamal?
Yes, he needs to start taking more pull-up threes. I think that's the bottom line, is that he has to, especially with the spacing now. I think that has definitely hampered Murray's ability to weave in and out of the pick and roll. His usage is like the lowest it's been in a minute now. And that's just because Jokic is obviously assuming more of the usage for sure. But I just think he's going to have to take more pull-up threes. And I think he's capable of doing it. It's more so of the want to do it. And I don't know if the staff is on him to say, like, hey, Jamal, you need to start taking more pull-up threes, because teams are not trapping Murray in the pick and roll anymore because of Jokic's ability in the short roll to hit Mike, AG in the dunker spot. Christian, again, teams are going to leave him open. But teams are not trapping Murray because they know he's not really that willing to take the pull-up three. Teams were trapping Murray against the Heat in the finals. Murray was getting trapped against the Lakers. He was getting trapped in pick and roll. That was happening when Murray was on. And even the Timberwolves series, he was getting trapped a bit as well. They were playing a lot of him one-on-one just because they had the defenders for it. But again, I just think Murray's got to increase the pull-up three volume. That's number one, I think, for me, that he has to prioritize that. Just get up more volume. And especially, too, like, teams going to give it to you. They're not, like I said, they're not going to trap him in the pick and roll. They're going to play him in drop coverage and try to guard, too. So
Hmm.
For me, I think that's just the main thing I think that'll help the Nuggets offense. But I mean, ultimately, for me, like I'm usually the optimist, and I think the Nuggets will ultimately be fine in the long run. But again, if Murray doesn't discover his play, then it's an issue because the Nuggets need their number two guy to be playoff ready, like he wasn't last year, unfortunately, but like the year before. I don't even think he has to be even that good. I like from when they won the championship. I just think he has to be better than what he was last year by a good amount, which I don't think is too substantial. But
Yeah, I do think
listen,
that's
he's
the
making
biggest.
$50 million for sure. Like I know a lot of people are pretty, say about the contract, and I think it's definitely that matters. We have to hold him to a standard. Um, and it's tough because as fans, right? You want to, I don't know about deflect or defend him just because he won the title and he was such an integral piece of that as well. Um, and that's why too, like a lot of the stuff with the Jokic version stuff is it's a bit sad because like AG, Mike, Christian, Jamal were all pivotal to winning the first championship in Nuggets history, and it's a shame just to see the fan base kind of just say like that they're nothing, and those guys stink, and without Jokic they're nothing. Of course, Jokic accentuates their skill sets, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
I'll be the first to tell you that. That's for sure. But again, the front office carefully structured this team in order to accentuate Jokic's strengths and his weaknesses. So I think that's where it really comes down to. But yeah, I mean, the bottom line is if Murray doesn't play better, I mean, then yeah, it's the Nugget season outlook will look pretty bleak in the long run.
Yeah, the playoff Murray as a concept, to me, the difference between that and the normal version of him is that 3-point volume.
Right.
And I think he's perfectly capable of doing that. And I think other players, even around the league, I think Anthony Edwards is a guy who looked around and saw what Luka was doing and was like, "Oh, I'm 6'7". I'm 6'7". I can hit these threes. I'm just going to take a bunch more of them." And it creates so much more gravity. And it would be so huge to me in the way that Denver can. That's his path to being an offensive engine. I feel like maybe he's not always going to be the most explosive athlete, and I that's not necessarily 100% in his control. Maybe he could be more fit in some way or another, but if he could take more threes, if he can be more aggressive, if mentally he can pick up the pace a little bit with his play, I think that can go a long way for Denver because stakes are so high because of the cap situation. Like he's the number two because you can't pay anybody else to be your number two because that's he's in that spot. Um, I had a conversation with somebody the other day about like finding other guys who want to play with Jokic and do people want to come to Denver? And there's an extent to which maybe not. Denver is not necessarily the biggest NBA destination for NBA players. Sure. Maybe there's some contingent of NBA players who don't like Jokic. Okay. But I think the biggest factor there is just like you can't pay people. The guys that Denver can pay, they love Jokic. They're happy to be here. Russ is happy to be here. Jeff Green was happy to be here. AG was happy to come to Denver. Paul Millsap was excited to be in Denver. I think Denver's been able to draw people that they can pay. They just
Paul
can't do that.
Millsap was excited to get paid.
He did get. I mean, yeah, that's true. But he also, I think, gave a lot of credence to Jokic's
Yeah.
game. When Jokic was like,
Sure.
"Oh, it's not my team. He's the star."
Right.
Paul Millsap immediately threw that back and was like, "Hey, this is your team. You are the star here." All those sorts of
That's
things.
true.
And I think that Paul Millsap is a respected name
He was
for
a good vet.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he multi-time All-Star, all those sorts of things. So there's that. The higher 3-point volume to get back to that tactical things. The other thing, Jamal's competitive advantage in the NBA, right? It is tough shot making. We can all agree with that.
Mm.
And he has the label of a big guard. He's 215, 220 pounds. That he's 6'5", supposedly bigger than a lot of other guards in the league. I would love it. I would be very interested and excited if they could take advantage of that more by finding him more opportunities as a post player, not just as maybe he doesn't have shake. Okay, maybe he can't have shake. I wish he would. I wish he would. Hey, maybe you can lose some weight or do whatever you need to do to get your body right. But if you can't do that and you're going to be yourself and you're not going to change, maybe Denver could set him up for those like high posts, get him more tough shots. I guess if he can hit them. And I buy he has the footwork and the creativity to do that against obviously he'll have a lot of mismatches against other point guards, but even against, even slight larger players, like if I'm sure in practice, Jamal Murray could give Peyton Watson the business. I know Peyton Watson is a great player and a great defender, but if you gave him post opportunities, I think Jamal Murray has the creativity and the shiftiness in that context to be more of a guy who might draw a double team, who might draw a little bit more pressure, who, especially without Jokic, maybe he could then create a little bit more for others. Um, I guess. Peter, how do you, I don't know. Am I crazy? Or I
No,
don't know.
I like him playing out of the post. Whenever he starts back somebody down, I usually feel pretty good about the possession. But I want to go back to something that you guys have just said. CT mentioned Calvin tried to build the team around Jokic. I don't know. We're already at a minute and 100 hour and 15 here. I don't know if we need to, if we want to do a whole segment on this, or maybe just save this for like more sample size later in the season. But watching that Pelicans game, it just made me realize like how little juice we have. We've got like all role players, right? It's like a very complimentary outside of Mike. I mean, even Mike is like a star in his role. Like he
And
can
AD.
kind of create his own shot. We just don't have like a Jordan Clarkson off the bench, right? Like this is going to piss you off, Ray, but that game would have been perfect for Bones Highland, right? Like that's the type of reason you draft a guy to come off the bench who can get you buckets and is not afraid to take 15, 20 shots in a game when one of your star players is out. We don't have that kind of roster. So what I'm going back and forth with is, are they maximizing Jokic? Are they building this in, like, here's a quick analogy for you, Ray. Jokic is the engine of the Nuggets. You take an engine out of a car, it's not going to run. It doesn't matter how perfect everything else is. Like the Nuggets are just lifeless without him. And a part of me wonders if it's like, maybe it's not even that they do or don't have good basketball IQ. It's like they've gotten used to playing with Jokic so much that they just don't know how to play without him. I mean, nobody can replicate Jokic, but there's got to be some sort of like practice or thought put into, okay, if he's not here, what do we do? And here's an idea that I've never heard anybody say yet, and maybe I'm really stupid for bringing this up. I would like to see the Nuggets have like a stretch of the game where Jokic is on the court and he's like out of the play. Like like have Jokic be in the dunker spot or be the decoy and let them like run some other stuff instead of him just being involved in every single play.
Yeah, I
wouldn't hate it.
think. Yeah, I think you make a good point about the no kind of creators on the team, and I think that really feeds into the team building aspect that we've seen over the past couple of years. Where once Booth once he took over in his role, he really wanted to prioritize getting a lot of wings, which I think was necessary. Um, Again, we could probably say, was Brown and Watson both redundant picks? I think yes. Um, would say of like an Andrew Nemhard instead of a Watson been a more beneficial pick? I'd probably say yes. Even though I like Peyton, I think he's got a lot of potential. Um, but again, the team is just
Nemhard can't guard
like
anybody though.
I think he's pretty decent defensively. He guarded Brunson decently in that playoff series. It was hit or miss, but I do like his offensive game in that aspect. But yeah, I think like you said with the Bones stuff. I mean, Bones actually not working out for the Nuggets actually had pretty big ramifications the year after, and especially what they kind of moved off of him with assets as well to move off of his deal, just because of the locker room tension, I guess, that it was reported. So I think this kind of really goes hand in hand with the team building aspect. I think it's Pete made a great point. I think it's very interesting to look at as far as like the um how we're like building the team. If you put a lot of shot creators on Jokic, then the defense will kind of slip and fall off. Just from like what I've seen in the past, when they surrounded him with Bones and Faku and Monte and all those guys, right, who were quote unquote Will Barton, right, shot creator types, the defense, fell off a cliff and they couldn't guard anyone at the point of attack, and that kind of fell out. And this is what I said on the timeline the other day too. As easy as you think it is to build around Jokic, it actually is somewhat of a challenge as well,
Right.
because Jokic is obviously um, an all-time player, right? But you do need certain personnel to cover for his deficiencies, definitely on the defensive end. And that's why you have a Brown, that's why you have a Watson, that's why you had a KCP, right, as a screen navigator. That was the exact guy that the Nuggets needed because of Jokic and the way he guards in the pick and roll. We're kind of seeing that this year. Brown is not the guy who's a screen navigator. KCP was, and there's been a lot of slip ups at the point of attack for the most part. But yeah, like what Gray said here, what about just one more shot creator? Yes, I do think adding another shot creator off the bench would be beneficial. Like I said, it really is. It just comes down to like one or two more guys, and that's the problem. Like we said before, with having the failed roster spots of a Pickett, of a Tyson, of a Ray, of a Zeke, of all these guys, right, that are just taking up roster spots, and like it would be more beneficial to use those spots on guys that could actually contribute / would be provide a different look to the roster.
I do have like a concern, and it was something I kind of took away from the Bones experience. Like I think that that definitely went south, and a lot of it was about Bones's how he approached how his mentality, and I think, for lack of a better term, I think it's just kind of his
He wanted out.
self-centeredness. Like I think he felt entitled to, especially because he came into Denver when Jamal wasn't there and was relied upon when Jamal wasn't there, and did a lot of good things when Jamal wasn't there. Um, to the point that when he comes back, I think, how do you, and maybe this gives some credit to the way Malone kind of eases guys into things. Can you get that can you get the genie back in the bottle in that way? I don't know if you can. But I think another part of it was, I don't think Jamal liked that,
No.
if I'm being honest. I don't think Jamal was comfortable with the idea that there was another guard in Denver who fans loved, who had the juice, had 40-point games and this sort of thing. So if you go out and you get another guy, I would love to see that, particularly if it's a point guard, because I think that's what we're talking about. I think there are a lot of guys. Julian is a 2. He can kind of create for himself. Mike is a wing, forward. Aaron Gordon, these are guys they can play. And I think that's not really threatening to Jamal because they're different positions. But if you go out and you get create like not a role player, not a Pickett, even a better version of those guys, not a game manager, a guy who has pop. Is Jamal cool with that? I don't know. I mean, I think they should do that. Like, looking ahead, I mean, CT, you probably know more than I do about the next draft class as far as guys Denver could bring in who might be able to fill that. And because I do think you have enough wings, you've got enough of the length, the defense, the athleticism, but you got a good amount of that stuff. I don't know I guess that's my only concern, is like, when you do bring in that guy, how does he fit in to the hierarchy? Especially because Denver is trying to compete. Because even if it's a veteran, that also comes with its own. A veteran might also be like, "Hey, I am who I am, and who are you? What is Jamal standing among those guys? What are the Jordan Pooles and the Jalen Brunsons and all these other stars think of Jamal in that way?" Like, I don't know. But I do. But to your points, y'all could use an on ball creator, an athlete, somebody with maybe Russ's athleticism, but also who I'm not scared when they take 15-foot jumpers.
I mean, Bruce was the perfect guy, for it being that sixth option because what he
Hmm.
provided was different from Murray, especially as a point of attack defender. He was able to
Yeah.
play quote unquote point guard in lineups when Murray was off the floor, but he could play beside Jamal as well. And I think that's what we're seeing now, like with the Russ and Jamal combination. I think they could play with Jokic, but without Jokic on the floor, I don't like that configuration. And it's just like Booth, I think, has just missed on the margins the last 2 years where it's kind of had an effect on the team now, as far as like the ancillary pieces are concerned. And I think Booth's done a lot of good for the team. I think the Christian Brown pick obviously was a home run that worked out very well. I think Payton is going to be good. I mean, Julian, I think the jury's still out on him, but I think he's trending in the right direction as long as he can clean up the defense. And Holmes too. Unfortunately, he was out this year, but I think I was high on him coming into the draft as being a guy. And it just seems like he kind of put a lot of his eggs in the draft basket, comparing to like trying to get other options on the free agent market.
Mhm.
That I think has probably made the team not as strong on the edges the past 2 years. So I
I
don't know
do
what he
feel
could
like
do, but we'll see what happens with that.
I do feel like that to some extent was necessary though. If you were gonna keep the core together long term, like if you're
Hmm.
gonna pay Jamal this money, you can't. I don't know if you can. Who can you afford? You can afford like the Reggie Jacksons of the world, and like that
Yeah.
isn't. I didn't love that either. Like I don't think you have. And I've also pondered around the trade machine a little bit these days. And who do you really have to move? You really the only reason you might be able to make any kind of trade this offseason is because you have Zeke. As much as Zeke is like mid, and I will admit, he's mid a lot, but you don't have any other contracts to move outside
I,
unless you want to
I
trade
think
AD, unless you want to trade Mike.
I think if you want to really swing and the Nuggets are kind of out of guys, you could probably trade one of the draft picks, whether that's Christian, Peyton, or Julian. I think probably Peyton would probably net you the most, at least realistic. 'Cause I think Christian's
There's
going to be in line to
value,
start. But
but
yeah, with Peyton,
financially,
there's value for sure. Yeah,
the money thing is where I'm really coming from with this. Is like
right,
those guys
right.
don't make enough for you to trade. Who are you going to trade? You can't. Kyle Kuzma is a guy who's on the trademark block right now, who I think is very unhappy in DC, and because I don't know, they're 2 years away from being 2 years away. Even though I think they're moving in the right direction, and I think he's just like in his late 20s, and you know at a point where like, okay, I want to go win basketball games, but like he's making 23 million dollars a year, something like that. And like you can't even you could you'd have to trade half the roster just to have enough money to trade for him, I guess is what I'm saying. So I don't know. It's a tough spot until
CT,
you
there's
extend the rookies, I guess. Once you extend some of the rookies, you'll get that flexibility.
CT. I just wanted to get in the weeds real quick about Julian's defense. There's been one thing that's really frustrating to me, which is I do feel like he's trying hard, but he just does
Trying
not
too hard.
he doesn't understand where to be at all right now. My best analogy is like, Ray, have you ever been to a football game where you can see the whole play develop and you're like, oh, that guy's going to break one on this side. Oh, the safety has an angle, but then they just take a horrible angle and they like run to him instead of like running to cut him off.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, that's how Julian plays defense, where it's like, I don't know about you guys, but like the way I learned to play defense is once you know who you're guarding, are they a shooter or are they a driver? And then if they're a shooter, you know how to stay close to them. You sprint up on them. If they're a driver, you got to, make sure you stay low, stay down. Obviously, if somebody's really good at both, like if they're like the Dame Lillard type, that's like, okay, you got to put your best defender on him and just hope for the best. But I've noticed that Julian he just like sprints at people instead of like being under control and trying to either cut him off or like take one thing away. I think he'll get there. It's just going to take time. I'm actually a little bit surprised, CT, that he spent 3 years at Gonzaga and isn't a little more sound on that end.
Yeah, I think Gonzaga had a lot of players to cover for him. Playing with Chet, playing with a couple other guys. Anton Watson was another guy who was a really good defender. It's a couple good point of attack guys. Yeah, I mean, I think with Julian, it's more so the team defense that's really problematic. I actually have liked him on the ball at certain points. I don't think he's gotten really cooked like one-on-one. I mean, sometimes he has, but the team defense is really bad. Just
he had a really bad face cut the other day where he just like lost track of his guy and he went in front of him and the guy got a layup. But
the switching also has been very bad, especially with him and Russ, him and Jamal. Like the switching has been really, really bad. As far as like, are we switching? Are we not? That's been problematic from what I've seen. He does need the reps, but in order for him to play in the playoffs, he's going to have to. Except we're getting to the MPJ bubble stuff, where it's like his offense might be decent enough to play, but defensively, if he can't stay on the floor, then it might be a problem. But I think Julian will be able to play. I mean, they have to find somebody else to play instead of just Christian was the only guy last year off the bench. I mean, whether it's Peyton and Julian, whether it's Vlatko, Peyton, and Julian, like they have to find at least like 2 to 3 guys you could throw out there in the playoff series and be like, we feel decent about where we're at. So there's a long way. I mean, I think the Nuggets will be okay for the most part.
I think that's the part that I struggle with that I keep having to remind myself, CT, is that there's going to be some early season lumps with these young guys, but they have to play through it. That is the only way to learn and get better is to actually play. They're not going to get better by sitting on the bench because we bring in some veteran, I'm sure there's probably a portion of us Nuggets fans who would love to have Justin Holiday available and win a few more games, but I understand the vision.
Yeah. I mean, I'm optimistic. It's November, so Julian's barely played last year, so I feel like the amount of reps he can get between now and May is pretty substantial.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I know we are running a bit longer than usual, so any closing thoughts for you guys as far as anything that we talked about today or anything we might be thinking about in the future? Maybe anything you might hope for from tomorrow's game?
Win.
Playability.
Can y'all lose with respect? Like I honestly wouldn't even really care if they lost. It's just the way that they've been losing.
Right.
I think is pretty embarrassing.
Yeah. I don't know. I just hope the team finds a groove.
Yeah.
Once Jokic comes back, I think it'll be fine. So,
what do you guys think of this? Fives is asking, do the Sixers start tanking for Cooper Flag? They've just dropped to 2-11. And, they have Paul George. A lot of people wanted us to trade for Paul George. And that's what I'm saying with the Mike.
Well, the Sixers have played 13 games, and they've played 0 games with Paul, Maxey, and Embiid together. So let's wait to see how they do with their big three actually on the floor. Here's a question, though.
Tanking them.
Are over or under 20 games for those 3 players combined this year to get on the floor?
I say over. I think Embiid's probably back now.
Okay.
But it's going to be tough, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say I'd take the over, but I'm not taking it like extremely.
Yeah, like 40, 35.
35 games, yeah.
Yeah.
But
you will see teams start tanking for Flag, though, sooner than later. He's that good of a prospect. So you'll see whether it's the Jazz, the Nets, I think will probably get there. The Raptors. Yeah.
It's interesting. I have this thought I've been thinking about. Like, there are so many not good teams in the East. I wonder, there seems to be this dynamic where the best draftees end up in the West anyway, even though the West is a better conference. I wonder if the tankers are cannibalizing each other in the East, if that makes sense.
Well, think about it. The lottery has the same number of teams from each conference every year, but there's more baddies teams that make the playoffs. So you're right. There's less talent in the East, but but by the numbers, the talent is still even in distribution from the draft to the conferences, not including trades.
Yeah. That's just my thought about it, is like maybe y'all just have so many teams in the hunt for this thing that like you're pushing each other out of the way. But yeah, I do want to wrap up to give Jarrett some amount of life. So if you've made it this far, we appreciate you listening, and slide us more tweets at I'm at Ravon Hackshaw, Peter's at Bucket since '88, CT's at CTFazio24, and you can tweet at the podcast, where I will dramatically read whatever you tweet if that's what you want to do, at Four Corner Pod. And I believe I am also, I'm Peter. I believe you're Reed Buckets on Blue Sky. If that's a transition we're making, we'll see. And I
What?
am at, is that you?
No.
Oh, oh, okay. That's just a random follow, huh? Okay. Well, shout out to Reed Buckets on Blue Sky. I'm at Ravon Hackshaw also on Blue Sky. I don't know if that will take off or not. We're always looking for alternatives to Twitter, and they seem to not stick, but we'll see. Yeah, CT, do you have anything coming out as far as draft analysis or anything like that?
I do. I actually have a draft article coming up in the coming weeks. Just kind of been like formulating it now, so nothing too concrete, but I will have a draft article coming out on some of the older prospects. So be on the lookout for that. And yeah, that's really about it for now. But yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. Appreciate it. Always great coming on the pod with you guys, and hopefully Jokic comes back so the Nuggets can restore some order moving forward.
Yeah, always great having you, my friend. Yeah, I occasionally do game recaps. I give my thoughts on games in written form at fourcornermedia.net, or sometimes I write about comparing McDonald's and Wendy's, or maybe I'll write some political things. We'll see. Yeah. So anyway, thanks for listening. And as
You're
always,
all over the place.
drop us a like, subscribe. It's free, support your boys. And we will see you next time.
Later.
Also, Ethan will Nuggetsy.